Okay, okay, good evening and welcome to everyone who's joined us on Periscope Live from the King's Fund. And we also have our media partners with us tonight, Neil Stewart Associates, who will be hoping to improve the recording quality of the events when they go up on YouTube. And we're going to do a podcast, which is amazing. And it's nice to see you all. I mean, literally, it is nice to see you all, because you will all know, having read my, I've had my eyes done so I can see you. I can't imagine, can you imagine there are still some people who hook glass around their nose and try and see things on rainy days, and when it all steams up, they don't know what they're doing. And, you know, why would they do that? It's like gas lamp, isn't it? Unbelievable. Anyway, having said that, Shane's taken his glasses off. It's because I threatened him. Please give a big warm welcome to Shane Tickell, who please be nice to him, because he's the managing director of our main sponsors. So please give him a very warm sponsor. Thank you for the money welcome. Yes.
Do you think Roy looks good without the glasses?
Yeah.
He does look younger, doesn't he? Would he be any less rude to our guests?
No.
Well, certainly not to you, Sean.
I'd just like to say welcome, enjoy your evening. John, it's a great pleasure to welcome. Thank you.
Was that it?
How much do you want?
Well, I don't know. You're paying. I mean, get out of it. Right, who's not been to a health chat before? Only a few of you. Okay, just the one with the glasses. Okay, fine, that's okay. Making a spectacle of yourself. We've got a vicar here this evening. A chaplain. Hospital. Which hospital are you from? Heart of England. Yes, they do need a few prayers, don't they? Having had a look at their accounts recently. Heart of England used to be run by a very talented doctor, didn't it? And the chief executive was a doctor, I think. Was that right? Who was that? I forget who it was now. Yeah. Anyway, well, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. Well, we try and bring interesting guests to come and join us. And tonight, I think we've got someone who is super interesting. A guy with a very interesting backstory and a huge challenge ahead of him. And I know we're in for a fascinating evening. So will you please give a very warm welcome to the Shadow Secretary of State for Health, Jon Ashworth. Thank you. Yeah, that was painless, wasn't it? Okay.
So far.
Right. You've had a busy day, haven't you? You had to drag the Secretary of State kicking and screaming to the House. What happened?
Oh yes, definitely. So presumably everyone will have seen the story in the Guardian today about 500.
Excuse me, we don't all read the Guardian.
Oh.
Some of us read proper newspapers, you know.
Daily Mail.
Yeah, I love the Mail. Yeah, I can do the crossword in the Mail. That's about the only one I can do.
Okay. Well, some of you will have seen the story in the media today about apparently 500,000 pieces of correspondence were left languishing in a warehouse somewhere, and this correspondence included blood test results, urine test results, biopsies, cancer tests, some of it related to child safety issues, and this has all now come to light. And of course,
but hang on, where did they go through one of the central repositories or the CSUs, or how did they get there?
Well, how do they get to this warehouse?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
This is the big question.
Because normally you'd have a result. The hospital would send the result to the GP. The GP would ring you up and say, "Come and see me," or "You're fine," or whatever. How did they end up in a warehouse?
Well, exactly. It's a very good question, which even Jeremy couldn't answer either today. This was all supposed to get.
What a shame.
This was all supposed to get to GPs. It didn't. Jeremy was and by the way, I got on very well with Jeremy. I'm not one of those politicians who likes to unnecessarily personalise.
He's all right. He sat where you're sitting, and we've had a chat.
Yeah.
He was a good guy. Yeah.
And I think he gets a lot of sort of nasty personal criticism on Twitter, and I don't go in for that sort of thing. But I have to hold him to account in the House of Commons. Now, Jeremy was alerted to this back in, we think, March of last year. On the last day before the House of Commons finished for the summer last July, he put forward what we call a written statement. 138 words was the statement, saying some correspondence didn't get delivered, and left it at that. And now, of course, whatever we're in, February 2017, we found out because of it. I suspect it must have got leaked to that newspaper. That some correspondence amounted to 500,000 pieces of correspondence. some of it very serious indeed. So I put down what we call an urgent question.
You have to get the Speaker's permission for that, do you?
Yeah. So Jeremy didn't want to come and give a statement to the House of Commons. I had to put down an urgent question, which meant that the Speaker, John Bercow, had to literally, if you like, drag Jeremy to the House of Commons today to answer questions on this scandal, which he didn't like. And lots of MPs were asking very legitimate questions about, well, when did you find out about this? How much does this cost? Are you absolutely sure that patient safety hasn't been compromised? Jeremy was saying, to be fair to him, that he doesn't think patient safety has been compromised, but there are still some cases which NHS England are looking into, so we don't know absolutely for certain yet.
The risk would be a test result that was sinister and never followed up on, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or this was also patients who had had operations at hospitals, and it was the next sort of the next steps in the treatment pathway, so it could have affected medicine and things like that. So there are questions here.
Yeah, I mean, what I don't understand is how you can get that amount of correspondence in one place, because the pathway for that correspondence has got nowhere. It doesn't go through a central repository, does it?
I know, this is what is extraordinary. There was literally in a warehouse somewhere. And did nobody think, crumbs, what is all this doing here? No.
Well, the guy, I suppose, who's renting out the space in the warehouse thought this is a rather good thing.
Yeah, well, exactly. And this was an NHS or Department of Health firm, 50% owned by the department and 50% owned by a private company.
So it was the forerunner of Capita, because
yes,
Capita made a cock up of it as well, haven't they?
Capita have now got the new contract.
But they've had a real problem with that as well.
Well, I agree, and one of the questions I put to Jeremy in the House of Commons today is, what scrutiny is he putting on Capita? Yeah. Because we know...
well, NHS England have got somebody working in Capita.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all know the horror stories about some of these firms. Yeah. We all get told about them. People are getting in touch with me today, and sometimes it's difficult to verify things when you're just getting an email in from somebody. So we're going to have to follow it up. But people getting in touch saying there's, terrible things going on as well. So we're going to have to look into that. But again, when I asked Jeremy what scrutiny is he putting onto Capita, he couldn't answer that today. So I think there are more questions on this, and this is going to rumble on for.
And in fairness, I think he'll probably want the answers to questions himself, won't he? I mean, I think this was kind of dumped on us all, wasn't it? Really? Well, I suppose you'll say he knew before Christmas.
Well, he knew from March last year.
Yeah.
And he chose not to reveal what was going on. Yeah. I mean, his justification for that was he didn't want to alarm people, which I can understand. But on the other hand, Jeremy has made transparency his watchword. He does lecture, quite rightly, the service quite a lot on transparency. So really did he, all he gave us was a 138-word statement last summer on the last day, and that's a bit of a trick. So those of you who perhaps don't follow politics as closely as we do, the last day of Parliament, as we're all leaving to go off for the summer, governments tend to, they call it taking out the trash. It's when they release 10, 15, 20 statements on things that they don't want to be scrutinised, because they know all the MPs are leaving and everyone's going off for the summer. They did it on that last day. Usually a government really ought to release a statement a week before Parliament finishes to allow MPs to go, hang on a minute, what's going on here, and ask questions.
And of course the Labour Party have never done that.
Of course not.
I'm pleased we covered that. Right. Listen, you're all up to it. You're a disgraceful lot.
Well, thanks.
You're all the same. Anyway, so, I mean, look, you're a nice, bright, good-looking young lad. You could get a proper job anywhere. How the hell did you end up in politics?
Well, it's a very, very charming introduction to me there, but I'm not sure if any of that's quite correct. Look, I don't want to sound sort of...
Don't tell me you wanted to do some good or put something back.
Well,
I'll be sick. I can't bear it.
No, but it's true, though. It is true. And I know, I mean, you're a sort of cynical old goat now, really, aren't you? But,
Please.
Because you've seen so many of us politicians come and go over the years, I suppose.
I'm on my 16th Secretary of State for Health.
Well,
I'm hoping to live long enough to get up to 20. I think it's fair enough, don't you think?
Well, hopefully I'll be in one of that.
Well,
One of those
you,
20.
well, it could be. You never know.
Uh,
I don't think you're going to be number 18. I
well,
think.
I'm sure we'll come on to that. But look, I mean, you know, you're cynical about it or you joke about it, but I think people do get involved in politics. On all
I
parties,
was
by
a
the way.
local authority councillor.
Yeah. people
And a
want
leader of a
change it.
council, and I did that for 20 years, and I know exactly what you mean about trying to. I mean, I got into politics because I was just so frustrated and angry with the way they were doing it where I lived, and
Yeah.
that's really why I got involved. But and I never got a seat.
Did you try?
Yes,
Where?
in Bristol. Yeah,
So who would have been
a
the
long time. I can't remember now. It was a long time ago. I mean, a real long time ago, and I was in the running for a seat. No, I never got selected. I mean, I didn't. I never even got beyond the trial by coffee. Gin, as it was in those days.
You could have been Secretary of State for Health.
Yeah,
yourself, if
yeah,
you'd been
answering
selected.
questions on a Friday afternoon about why I've lost 500,000. If I'd have done it, it would have been 500,000 and then more. You know, I mean, yeah. So yeah, no, I get that. Where was then? Where were you then? Where were you born? Where did you start?
I was born in Salford, at what in them days was Hope Hospital, now Salford Royal.
Yeah.
Place I visited a few weeks ago. To look
Yeah,
at some of the work that they're
it's
doing.
run by St David Dorman.
I know he's one of Jeremy's favourites.
Absolutely, yes. Oh, we all genuflect at the thought of his name.
Yeah, but it's
Yes.
a very, to be fair, very interesting project they've got there. This Vanguard project that they're working on.
Yeah, and
So-
he's got a very. Did he show you his dashboard?
Well, I
He's
didn't meet him, but I met his.
Oh, no one meets him.
You know,
That'd be silly.
but I met some of the senior people there, and it is a very interesting initiative. And I think everybody is watching it very carefully to see if initiatives like that work. Aren't we? If they work, that is a good thing. We hope that they work. So we want to see how it pans out over the next few years. And also in the Greater Manchester area, we're all very interested to see what happens with this Devo
Yeah.
Mank proposal and
Yeah.
whether it is.
Well, we'll
gonna be a
get on
great
to that in a minute. I mean, if Burnham gets elected
Yeah.
there, that'll have serious implications, won't it? We'll have a look at that in a minute. But of course, St David runs the Pennines now as well, doesn't he? The Pennine Hospital.
Yeah,
He's,
well, they've had a few problems. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's a big hospital, isn't it? No money, big hospital.
Of course, when I was growing up, it was Crumpsall Hospital, of course.
Crumpsall.
That's what it was called, Crumpsall Hospital. When
Crumpsall Hospital.
when I
You've
was
got to
there.
say it like that, haven't you? Like a northerner, Crumpsall.
Well, I am an Northerner. So that was where I was born. I was born in Salford, grew up in Manchester in, working class family. My dad was actually a croupier in a casino. He started off on the docks in Salford when we still had docks in Salford in the 60s or whatever. And then the casinos opened up across the country or in some of the cities across the country, and he became a croupier. And that's where he met my mum, who was a barmaid. And then I came along, and so yeah.
Where did you go to uni?
I went to Durham.
Yeah.
Went to Durham.
It's a nice university.
It was nice.
I've
Yeah.
done a couple of summer schools there. It's
Yeah.
a very nice setting, isn't it?
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
What did you study?
Politics and philosophy.
So you haven't got a proper degree then. Don't tell me you've got a Desmond, have you?
What, a 2-2?
Yeah.
No, I've not got that.
What if you got a first?
No, 2-1. I was too busy doing student politics.
3 years at the taxpayer's expense.
I think it was in them days.
Yeah. Not a proper degree. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Did you do that because it was just an easy degree, or did you want to get into politics?
I was obsessed with politics. I suppose I still am because I'm a shadow cabinet minister. But I was obsessed with politics, because as we were saying, honestly believe that if you want to change the world, you get involved in politics. And people who want to change the world get involved through different avenues. Some join other political parties, some get involved in their faith groups, some get involved in charities or whatever. For me, I thought if you wanted to change things, you have to do it through politics, helping politicians win executive office.
But what did you want to change? I mean, was it injustice? Was it
Yeah.
what was it you wanted to change?
Growing up, I always had a strong sense that things were not quite right or fair. I was growing up in the 80s in a northern industrial town in North Manchester, a town called Radcliffe, which at one point in its history had mills, had a little tiny bit of coal mining, not much, but had industry, by the 80s, all that was disappearing.
So this was the Thatcher years,
Yeah,
wasn't
and
it?
it just didn't seem fair to. I mean, you might not believe this, but I just remember growing up. Things didn't seem fair to me. Why I thought was our school falling to pieces with buckets everywhere, with water falling into the falling into the buckets from the roof. When I knew up the road that there was Bury Grammar School, which was looked from the outside to have fabulous facilities and looked fantastic. And I remember, the poverty in the area, the inequalities. I mean, I perhaps obviously didn't understand it in an intellectual sense as a sort of 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and so on, but I could see it, and it seemed to me not right, and I wanted to make a difference.
And you had a difficult home life as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I did, and this is something I've begun to talk about in the last few weeks. So I grew up with an alcoholic father. He was a very clever man. He didn't pass the 11 plus, but I wonder if in a different set of circumstances he could have gone on to university and had a very different life. But anyway, he didn't pass the 11 plus, even though he was obviously in later life it's clear he would have been intelligent to go on. But he had a drink problem. And this drink problem coloured my childhood completely. It led to the breakup of our family. And when I would go and live with my dad at weekends, especially as I was getting more into sort of 10, 11, 12 and 13, I spent a lot of my time looking after my dad. I mean, because he was drunk all weekend. It would be very typical for me to return home on a Friday. My dad had been in the pub, coming to get me after school. I remember him falling over once, literally falling over in the street. We had to go and ring a taxi to take us home. Or, opening the fridge and nothing in the fridge other than these massive big bottles of sort of cheap white wine. And that was his sort of supplies for the weekend. And this was all throughout my life as a child, and maybe that's also why I got involved in politics, because I think it meant I grew up pretty quickly. It made me more adult, perhaps, than some of the other children. Made me have to think about things in a slightly different way. Now, at the time, I didn't talk about it or complain about it. I just got on with it. But it's only recently I've begun to talk about it because, look, I think a couple of things. Some other MPs have begun to talk about it now. Liam Byrne, Caroline Flint, and we're trying to put in place a set of policies to support children of alcoholics. When they started talking about it a year ago, I realised that I wasn't the only one in these circumstances, that other people are affected by this. And when I became Shadow Secretary of State for Health, I made a decision to speak publicly about it, because it would be easy and perhaps lots of fun for me to spend my time saying how much the Tories are terrible and having a go at Jeremy Hunt and all that kind of stuff. And obviously I'll carry on doing that because I'm the Shadow Secretary of State of Health. I have a responsibility to hold Jeremy to account. But then I also thought, perhaps if I can speak out, and perhaps if I can get the government to change their position on this, then at least I'll have changed something and I'll have done something. Because when I looked into it, according to some of the experts, there's 2.5 million children living with an alcoholic parent. And I just think if we can change something, even if it's only small, even if I can get the government to put in place, support helplines and support websites, or if I can get the government to put in place sort of training for school nurses or for teachers or whatever, even if it's a small thing, if I can get government to do that, then at least I'll have done something that made it all worthwhile.
Very powerful story. What about alcohol pricing?
Well, it's a controversial issue, isn't it? And I think there is, there's division on the Tory party, I'd say there's probably division on the Labour Party. It's being challenged in the courts in Scotland at the moment, and I think we're all waiting to see what happens, because the Scottish government have tried to introduce it, and I think it's the whisky industry have taken them to court. I think we've got to do something. When you look at the price of some of this high strength cider, I'm not talking about the kind of the traditional craft ciders produced in Somerset and places like that. I'm talking about this really strong cider which is sold for crazy prices in the shops. I think we've got to do something.
But
about
not
it.
everybody who buys cheap booze is an alcoholic. So maybe the issue is to find out what happens in people's lives where they look to alcohol or drugs or other things to support them in their journey of life.
Yeah, it's not a silver bullet. And actually, if there was minimum pricing, my father would still have drank.
He'd have just spent more money doing it.
Spent more money drinking. So I don't think it's a silver bullet, but you've got to use every weapon in your armoury on this, I think. But you're right. I mean, when I think back to my own father, he would have still have drank. And then the problem that my dad had when, in later life, when I was an adult, and he finished work, he was drinking even more, and because he had finished working, well, what he'd done is, I went back home one Christmas. I was about in my late 20s, and he turned around to me and he said, "I'm leaving. I'm going to Thailand." I went, "You what?" "I'm leaving. I'm going to Thailand." And I didn't believe him. I just thought, rubbish, the way sort of, drunk people talk. You just sort of get used to going, yeah, whatever. But he did. He went. He walked out of his job and he went to Thailand, and he was there for about a year or so. And what happened when he was there, he was drinking a bottle of whiskey a day, pretty much.
So even cheaper.
So it probably is cheaper over there, but it's beyond the kind of white wine over here. And the thing that really wanted me to do something about it is that, and this is what I spoke out in House of Commons, and actually, to be fair, Nicola Blackwood, the Toy Minister, was in tears, is that my dad, when he was in Thailand, I was getting married to my wife. My dad only met my wife once, briefly, and I wanted him to come to the marriage, to the wedding, sorry. And about a couple of days, a day or so, it was either a day before, maybe 2 days before, something like that, I got the phone call and he said he's not coming. And I was so angry, and I couldn't speak to him, and I was just furious, because I knew, I was thinking, he's drunk again, and, this, bloody drink, blah, blah, blah. I was so angry with him. And a few months later, he was dead. And then when I went to Thailand to, deal with all the arrangements, the body, the bank account, all the stuff you have to deal with, his friend said to me he wanted to come, but he felt he couldn't, because he felt he would embarrass me at the wedding, because he felt that I've now gone on to work in politics, and that it would be, there'd be posh people there, people who went to university, people who were politicians, that he felt he couldn't be there because he would embarrass me and he would shame me and all that. And that is such a devastating thing for me, such a regret for me.
But he loved you.
No, he loved me, and
Otherwise he wouldn't have stayed away.
no, he loved me, and he wasn't violent, wasn't abusive, so I was lucky in that respect. But there are so many children who are not lucky. They're growing up with a parent who has alcohol abuse problems or other substance abuse problems. They're growing up with a parent who, they're terrified that if they say the wrong word in the house, it will spark a violent, aggressive reaction. They spend the day just hoping to sort of disappear into the background, because of that parent is always on the edge and you don't know what is going to happen. And this is what it comes back to for me. This is such a extraordinary experience for me. So quite emotional to speak about it. I honestly feel quite guilty speaking about it, to be frank. But as I say, if I can use those experiences to try and change policy and to make a difference, it will have been all worthwhile. And to come back to your sort of, I know jokey but cynical sort of jokey point at the start. You can't change everything all the time, but if you can change something, it's been worth it.
Some of us have to make the effort and change things. That's right. Yeah. So you went to. Thank you for sharing that with us. I guess it's given us all cause to pause and think. So you went to uni.
Yeah.
You came out with a miserable degree, having wasted your time. And what did you do then?
I went to work in politics. I've done nothing but politics.
So you've never had a proper job?
I'm the sort of person that probably drives you up the wall.
It does. You've never had a proper job. You've never created wealth. You've never created a job. You've never sacked anybody. You've never hired anybody. You've never made anything. You've never contributed to the economy.
As I say, the sort of person who drives you up the wall. Yeah.
I can't believe it. Shane, what do you think? Right, okay.
So I went off to become a, I worked in a youth organisation in the Labour Party called Labour Students.
Students.
And I wasted my time.
They're all students at Labour Students.
Doing student politics and messing around in student politics and all that. And then I got a job being a researcher for the Labour Party in what was then Millbank Tower.
Oh, Millbank. Now, who was Tony around then? Tony Blair
was the leader of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and Alan Milburn was around, of course. Big thinker on health.
Alan Milburn was the Health Secretary. And what happened through working there is that it was the run-up to the 2001 general election campaign. And
things could only get better.
That was 97. This was 2001 was schools and hospitals first.
That's right. Yeah. And John Prescott punched somebody in the face.
And all that. And
he's my kind of a guy. There's a real politician. Yeah.
Well, careful with your questioning tonight. So anyway, I did research there, and the Tory party, which is ironic given the history of where we are now, but the Tory party was split down the middle on the issue of Europe, and there was all these There's a minor disagreement with John Major. That was all that was. Yeah. And there was all these Conservative MPs and candidates saying different things to what the leadership was saying, and it was my job to research all that. I've got to remember this was the days before Google, and obviously way before Twitter and all that. So it actually meant doing proper research. It meant like going to local archives and getting newspaper cuttings and going to local libraries and things like that. It was proper research. And I pulled together all the different Tory MPs with all the different positions on Europe. And the Labour Party really liked it. And one person who really, really liked it was a guy called Gordon Brown, who... I remember him. Yeah, who then used it to present a sort of press conference to expose the divisions in the Tory Party in Europe. And then through that, I ended up doing more research projects for Gordon Brown. And to cut a long story short, about 3 or 4 years later, I ended up working for Gordon Brown directly. And I worked for him when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer and when he was Prime Minister, from the sort of the time when he was at the height of his kind of dominance of the British political scene, right to the end when we lost that general election to David Cameron. So I've seen highs and lows in politics, but it is fascinating. But I am sorry, all I've done is politics.
No, well, it's made room for people like me who couldn't do politics. So, I mean, was it Gordon Brown's fault, really, the international banking crisis, because he built too many hospitals and schools? Must be, mustn't it? Yeah?
Well, exactly. It wasn't his fault, was it? And,
no.
And I'm sure you'll want to come on to it, but it is, he did. Whatever people think of him, and I know he's a figure of some controversy, some people...
Well, everybody who leaves office always is. I mean, all political careers end in tears. And very few leave with a reputation that people say he was a wonderful Prime Minister or she was a wonderful Prime Minister. Everybody gets a slagging, don't they, for something?
Yeah, and I think, I personally think, and I suppose I would say this, but I do think history will be kinder to him. When you look at, we're here to talk about health policy, and I'm sure you want to come on to it, but when you look at what he did about the way in which he won support for a national insurance increase to fund the health service, and effectively treble the investment in cash terms, I think more than double it in real terms. That was a very brave thing for a politician to do, but he also got away with it. It was popular. Now, by the end of the Labour government, people may well have thought, we're paying too much tax and the rest of it. But in the 2002-2003 time, you had a Chancellor of the Exchequer increasing tax for everybody and allocating it to the health service, and they got re-elected. People liked it, and I think there's something quite interesting.
Well, Blair made the promise, didn't he, to get us up to the European average, and I think at the time we were about 6.6% of GDP, and we went from that to 8.7, I think, and it showed because waiting lists just pretty much disappeared. Unfortunately, the NHS never invested the money in innovation and modernisation. They just used it, I think. Well, first of all, they paid themselves more. And secondly, they went through the waiting lists, and there were no waiting lists. So although there was a benefit, it was popular with the public. If you look back on it, sort of with a manager's eye, you'd say, you know what, we wasted an opportunity with some of that money.
Do you think so?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Yeah. I think that for people not to have to wait. I mean, waiting lists were measured in John Major's time. Were measured in in 18 months for a hip operation, and we got it down to 18. I remember Andy Burnham saying there are no waiting lists, and I mean there was a bit of an argy-bargy over whether or not, you know, there were none at all. But I mean cataracts were down to 2 or 3 weeks, you know, and it was the money that did that. I mean a lot of consultants made a few quid out of it as well, but if we'd have had that kind of money and perhaps had rather like they're trying to do now with sustainability and transformation, you know, we didn't, I don't think, reserve enough for the transformation of healthcare. Although to be honest, at that time, I mean, it's easy to think of then through the prism of today, but if you look at then, the innovation wasn't really there around then. You know, it was still very much a sort of pencil and paper approach, and now it doesn't need to be. So you got, anyway, so you got a seat then. Did you get your first go? Did you get a seat first time round?
I got a seat in 2011 in a by-election. So I worked for Gordon Brown till the end, and then I did a bit of work.
Where is Gordon now? I mean, is he okay? You never hear of him now, do you?
He's doing loads of stuff. I mean, he's in Scotland a lot, but he does a lot of work with the UN on child poverty and, and things like that. And he's very interested in the debate about the Constitution and the Union and what that means. It's a very live debate with Brexit putting huge pressure on the Union and how will you resolve that. So he is making considered heavyweight contributions to that discussion. But I mean, that is,
you don't
by
see
his
him
nature, is more Scotland.
He's never in Westminster, is he?
No, he's not an MP anymore, and he's not the sort of person to go in the House of Lords. So, so you don't. He's very rarely down, but he does. You know, every so often he comes to London to make a speech. But he's very, as I say, he's got this big international work on with the UN on child poverty, and he's interested in the future of the Union and what that means. So.
Yeah. So anyway, I interrupted you. So you got your first seat first time round.
Yeah. So
that's very good, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
So there was
must have been a poor field.
Well, it was. I came in a by-election actually.
What were the circumstances?
There was the MP for Leicester South, a guy called Sir Peter Soulsby.
Oh yes.
Announced that he was going off to be the mayor of Leicester. See, we in Leicester were one of the first cities. One of the only cities to go for an actual mayor. I mean, remember there was lots of referendums across the country and they got rejected. Then George Osborne said they're going to have metro mayors anyway. But Leicester actually went for a mayoral system. And as soon as this mayoral system was agreed in the city of Leicester, the sitting MP went, right, sod this, I'm off. And he went.
Job for life.
He went for the mayor's. He had been the local government, the city council leader for sort of 20 years before he became an MP. So he went for it. And then I thought, well, me and my wife were based in the Midlands because my wife's from the Nottingham area, so we were living in the Midlands by that point. And I thought, well, this is coming up, so I go for it. Everyone said to me, you'll have no chance. They want someone from Leicester. And I went, well, you know what? I'm sort of, you know, you see other people in other parts of the country go for seats which they're not from. So, you know, let me, you know, what have I got to lose? You know, Labour Party was in opposition. I wasn't working for Gordon Brown anymore. I was wondering what else was going on, and I put my name forward. Lots of people, as I say, in Leicester said, well, no, we'll want somebody from Leicester. And often what sometimes happens in these things, people say they want somebody from the local area, but actually sometimes they don't.
The locals come with a lot of baggage.
Well, you sort of, yes, you see what I mean.
It's how Michael Gove got his seat in Surrey Heath, which is my constituency. That
could have been you. That could have been you.
How different the world might have been. Yeah, so you sneaked in under the wire.
Yeah, and then you know, and then my opponent said, don't vote for him. Because me and my wife were, I say Nottingham, we were actually living in Mansfield, because my wife's from the Mansfield area in Nottingham. And my opponents, my Liberal opponents mainly, but all the political opponents, said he's not from round here on the leaflets. Fair enough, that's what goes on in politics. But they put on the leaflets, he's from Mansfield, as if that's the most devastating thing you can say about somebody. He's from Mansfield, and then, but also, I don't know if many of you know Leicester particularly well.
Anybody from Leicester?
Oh, whereabouts?
There is a young lady from Leicester. Yeah, I think. Can you finish that, Shane?
Oh, do you? Oh,
sorry,
hello.
say again. Oh yeah.
Nice to say. Yeah. Oh, right. Brilliant. Oh, good to see. Well, I got support from Unite when I ran for the seat, but do you live in the city or do you live? Well, you know the city well, so Leicester is a proud, diverse city where people from across the world have come to make Leicester their home. So sort of running an argument, oh, he's not from round here, he's from Mansfield. That's the last place it's going to work in a city like Leicester.
They used to have a quite good football team, didn't they?
Well, Leicester, well, we'll see how they get on with Liverpool tonight.
Yeah. They sacked
They
the
shouldn't.
man.
Yeah, they shouldn't have sacked Ranieri.
No,
They shouldn't have done.
no, I think that was. Well, no, I think no. It's success that counts. Get rid of him. Find somebody who can deliver the goals. See, that's the difference between you and me. He's not there to do good. He's there to score goals.
Yeah, I'm just too sort of emotional and about these things. You're hard-nosed and
Well, I don't know about that. I just, if they're going to stay up, they've got to score goals, haven't they? And if he can't do it, somebody else will have to.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens tonight then at this Liverpool game.
Yeah, they'll win tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Hope so.
Yeah. So you sneaked under the wire. You
Yeah.
got a seat. What was your majority? Did you double it?
When I first got elected?
Yeah.
About 12,000.
12,000. I mean, that is a mighty majority, isn't it? You don't count that. You weigh it. Yeah. That's a pretty safe seat, isn't it?
Well, you don't take anything for granted. I mean, it has been a Liberal seat in the past. Actually, in 1983, it was a Conservative seat.
You never know. It might be a Liberal seat again, mate.
But you never know. Well, majority's bigger than that now, so hopefully
Yeah.
they'll be all right. But who knows? You don't know. You can't ever take anything for granted because ultimately, your constituents are your boss. And that's the other thing about doing this job. I mean, I'm the Shadow Secretary of State for Health. It's a big job. It's a busy job. But that's not my first job. My first job is being the MP for Leicester South.
I try and get that through, to people in the health service. They have very deferential about MPs, and I don't mean that they should be rude to MPs, but they need to remember they work for us. And in the current situation where STPs are hacking their way through services because they've got no money, the answer is not to dissemble and excuse themselves, it's to say we're doing it, we don't want to do it, we're having to do it because we've got no bloody money. Give us some more money, we won't do it. And I don't know why the NHS doesn't sort of rise up as one and say that.
Say it to the MPs or say it to the government?
Say it to the local MPs, don't come here grizzling about, what we're doing, go to Westminster and sort it, that's what I'm paying you for.
I think lots of MPs will complain that's exactly what SDPs are doing at the moment, I think.
Well, I hope they are. Anyway, so was the shadow job health wasn't your first job, was it?
No. So I became a whip, first of all, and then I became the...
How did you get on with Jeremy Corbyn when you were a whip?
Well, he wasn't always the most loyal of Labour MPs in following the whip. But I always got on perfectly well with Jeremy. Hopefully, one of the things that you will realise through this discussion tonight, hopefully, is that I'm generally an easygoing sort of bloke who tends to get on with most people. So I always have a very good relationship with Jeremy, way before him becoming the leader of the Labour Party was ever on anyone's radar. But he was never the most loyal of Labour MPs to the whip. But I didn't have to sort of tell him off or anything like that. There was more senior whips than me to do it. And then I became a shadow minister in the Cabinet Office team, which is this odd department, as you know, at the centre of government, which has lots of different bits and bobs, government IT contracts, procurement policy, stuff around the voluntary sector, and things like that.
It's an extension of the Treasury, isn't it, in many ways?
Well, I mean, different prime ministers try to make it an extension of 10 Downing Street, and sometimes try to build it up as a rival to the Treasury. But as we know, and the way government works, the government machine responds to powerful departments, and the Treasury is one of the most powerful departments in Whitehall. All the time when Prime Ministers try and make the Cabinet Office a counterweight, it just doesn't work, because it's a funny little office.
So were you surprised when you got the health job?
Oh yeah, absolutely surprised.
Came out of the blue?
Completely came out of the blue. I mean, I've been very honest in this job. I've raised health issues on behalf of Leicester South, as you'd expect. I've been very involved in the future of children's heart services at Glenfield, for example. We've got particular mental health related issues in Leicester, so I've had lots of interactions with Leicestershire Partnership Trust over the years. And the other issues that MPs are expected to raise in the House of Commons on behalf of their constituents. But I've never been involved in health policy development until this role. I've done economic policy because I worked in the Treasury. and I've been involved in the broader political side of things with my work when I was in 10 Downing Street. So I wasn't expecting this job when I got it. I'm loving it. I think it's the most wonderful, fabulous job to have. And what I love about it particularly is meeting so many different people who work in so many different strands across the service and listening and learning. And one of the big messages I want to get across tonight, I know we're going to talk about the policy development, is that I'm here to listen and I'm here to work with people. And we've got 3 or 4 years until the next general election, and I hope over the next 3 or 4 years
I wouldn't get excited.
we can, well, you never know in life, but I hope over the next 3 years I can work closely with people who work in the health service and really put together a sensible set of policies.
I don't want to. I get on to health policy. I don't want to get into the territory of the blinding obvious. But I mean, you know, I can kind of guess what you're going to say, really. But I mean, the Corbyn thing. We've got to. Yeah, we can't not discuss the Corbyn thing, can we? Really. I can't. I mean, the guy. It's a terrible thing to say, but he just doesn't look like a leader, does he? I mean, I know Mahatma Gandhi didn't look like a leader, but he was, you know, because he had a bit of something else. But, you know, he just, I mean, he looks, you know, he's like got a jacket that's too big for him, and it's brown, and a French bloody fisherman's hat, and oh Christ, you know, if he walked in the door, you know, say, "Well, you give me a job," you say, "Yeah, go and sell the big issue." I mean, he looks awful, doesn't he?
Well,
can't you smarten him up?
Look, I'm not responsible for Jeremy's wardrobe. Jeremy has been elected twice now.
That's it. Is it 300,000?
A Labour Party member.
Biggest political party in Europe.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it was at one point. I don't think it is anymore. But he's been elected twice now by party members.
I know.
I mean, I am.
Know.
Look, I'll be honest. I didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I voted for Yvette Cooper.
Yeah.
I thought there was something in, you know, maybe it's time for the Labour Party to have a woman leader.
I've been promoting Yvette for a long time, which is probably why she's got nowhere. But I thought she'd make a great leader.
Yeah. So, but you know, I'm a Labour man, and I know some of my colleagues have had different views on this. I'm not going to get into sort of rowing with them. But for me, he's been elected leader. We've got a job to do, which is
you've got to get on with it.
Yeah. We've just got to get on with it, and that's my approach to these things. I don't get into all the kind of, you know, sort of plotting and briefing and all that.
No, but I mean, I don't want to go into that territory, but if you look at it sensibly and strategically, you'd have to be thinking, well, look, you know, we know when the election's going to come. We've got, you know, austerity that's driving everybody balmy, public sector on their knees. It is an open goal. How do we deal with that? Because you're not going to get the England middle classes to vote Labour in the way that Tony Blair did. No. And that's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, and we've got to, in the Labour Party, put forward a set of policies which try to win people.
Do you think you can win it on policy alone?
I think we've got to put forward a set of policies, but we've also got to put forward a vision as well about the future of the country. And actually, when you talk to people, whether they're in, you know, the sort of the typical Middle England seat of, you know, I don't know, kind of Bedford or Swindon or these sorts of seats which decide general elections, you know, people there who are getting on with life, they're worried about cost of childcare, they're worried about the state of the NHS, they're worried about the quality of the schools for their kids, they're worried that their wages do not seem to be keeping up with the general cost of living. You know, there's a whole host of things that the Labour Party can be and should be.
And they're going to be worrying about waiting lists soon as well.
Yeah,
400,000 people on the waiting list by April.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And people sort of criticise, the Labour Party only ever goes on about the NHS. Or, you know, when you look at all the polling now, the NHS is the top issue.
Didn't work in Copeland though, did it?
Well, no, and we've got to understand why it didn't. I mean, there is obviously
the Sellafield issue, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, there is the nuclear industry issue, and you know, I'm not going to sort of, you know, beat around the bush. Copeland is a devastating result for the Labour Party. We've got to really put some serious thought into what went wrong. I mean, one of the things that sometimes goes on in the Labour Party or amongst the kind of supporters is this sort of idea that if you were appealing to those people in Bedford or Swindon or Stevenage who switched their vote from, say, maybe Tony Blair, Gordon Brown to David Cameron, if you're trying to win them back, that somehow you're selling out on your principles. You're not. You know, your principles demand that you've got to try and get yourself into government. And what you've got to do is to convince those people who did switch from probably Conservative in 92 to Labour throughout the Labour government years, and then they went back to Conservatives in 2010 and 2015. You've got to convince those people that there's good reasons for them to come back. And the way I always characterise it is that, look, conservative voters are not our enemies. You know, they're our neighbours. You know, people who live on my street don't vote for me, they vote Conservative. But it should be our job to convince them as best we can to switch their vote. And I don't, sometimes the debate in the Labour Party gets into the territory of that's a betrayal, or, you know, that's not what it's about. And actually, you win elections by getting people to, persuading people to come over to your side.
Well, that's, you know, I mean, Corbyn is clearly a political intellectual, sort of Michael Foot type of intellectual, really. But it's the appeal, the whole package, the confidence that people can have. So let's fast forward. Let's say you win the next election. You're the Secretary of State for Health.
Yeah. There's the big question.
What are you going to do? Come on, big boy.
What do you think I should do?
Oh, listen, I would switch funding, NHS funding, into the national insurance, because it's roughly the same amount of money. It would ring fence it from the Treasury, make it a lot clearer how much we were spending, have the Office of, Budget Responsibility to invigilate it separately, so we make sure the government didn't cheat. I'd immediately put tuppence on national insurance, or whatever the equivalent amount is, and say to the public, I'm going to do this to stabilise the health service, get it back on its feet, and we'll review it halfway through this Parliament. In the long term, I would aim to get back to the European average funding, which we can't do immediately because it depends on the growth of the economy, and the economy is only growing at 2%, the NHS grows at 4%, you know, bang. Well, that's what I would do, but fortunately, I won't have to do it because I will be on a beach somewhere probably. So what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, you know, I don't think we're a million miles away from where you are. I mean, clearly the funding situation will have to be quickly stabilised if the government isn't prepared to stabilise it themselves over the next couple of years. We've got a budget coming up. What is interesting, when you look at the history of big winter crises in the NHS, and I do think we've had a big problem this winter, usually that has been the spur for governments to come in and do something quite radical. So you talked about Tony Blair saying getting the money up to the European average. That came after that very difficult winter of 99-2000. The big Ken Clarke reforms in the 80s, purchase first, provider split, if you recall, came after the very difficult winters.
And Mrs. Thatcher lost her patience and said, why are we putting all this money and nothing's happening?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it does make you wonder, and if you read things suggesting they're going to come forward with some sort of new sort of way of dealing with urgent care, A&Es and so on, and they've clearly got to do something about social care in the budget. It does make you wonder whether they're going to do something big or whether they're just going to try and tinker.
Right.
So,
well, I just wanted to stop you. I'll come back in a second, I promise you. But I mean, I want to put together the fact that you've been a sort of treasury person, you know, and you understand it from the Treasury point of view. Thanks. And the health service thing. Now, I kind of get the frustration that the Treasury have with the NHS, and you probably, I'm sure you would have seen it yourself when you were there, because NHS efficiency historically goes up by 0.8%, and its best was ever 1.2% a year. That was the best it ever did. It's around 1%. NHS efficiency is around 1%. National efficiency gains go up at 2.5%. The NHS lags behind. Simon Stevens, in the 5-year forward view that we now recognise is the 150-week forward view, is looking for 3, or now it's going to be 4, even 5% efficiency gains. And the NHS is people heavy. It requires face-to-face contact. Efficiency can only really be done at the margin. Lord Carter is saying there's 5 billion to come out, but we won't get it out by the 220. So what would you do about
well, that's a massive question,
NHS efficiency? But I mean, would you just accept the fact it's as efficient as it's going to get and that's it? Or how do you drive efficiency? Do you think that's what May is doing? Holding back the money and making austerity the driver of innovation?
Well, I think, look, I don't want to be here and just be sort of boorishly partisan, but I do genuinely believe that Theresa May has got no interest in the NHS. this rumour goes round that apparently she said, I think to Simon Stevens, that I don't understand it. We managed to cut the police budget and crime hasn't gone through the roof, and we managed to reform the defence procurement budgets, and that's all been fine. Why can't we do the same to the NHS?
Well, just hold that thought, because she's right. I mean, the police efficiency's gone up in the Metropolitan Police area, even though it's been cut. They made a mess of the prisons by cutting the prison officers. If they had done other things, but fundamentally she's right. Why can't we get, and we all love the NHS here, I mean, I'm not slagging it off, but why can't we get NHS efficiency up?
Because presumably it's because, as we know, we are a growing population, an ageing population with lots of complex needs, with people having greater expectations on the NHS as well, as we have greater expectations on a whole host of services now across the board. But of course we have to drive for efficiencies, but if you want to increase efficiencies, and if you also want to increase productivity, you've got to ask yourself, why are they doing some of the things they're doing? I mean, investment in infrastructure...
Well, productivity and efficiency aren't necessarily the same thing.
No, they're not the same thing, but they're both important. They're both important yardsticks for the man from the Treasury.
Yes.
Right? And so if you want to see greater productivity in the NHS as well, all the evidence, I believe, suggests that if you're cutting investment in your capital, if you're cutting your investment in infrastructure, and effectively shifting that money to fill holes in your revenue budget, that is not going to drive the productivity that we want to see in the NHS. So, look, it's sort of easy to say there should be more efficiency and greater productivity, and I agree with it, but at the end of the day, it cannot go on with this level of funding it's getting. The government have got to do something. I would say they've got to do it in their March budget.
Well, I don't know how I got sucked into answering my own question. I rather regret that now, but let me ask you the question again. What would you do?
What would I do? Well, look, we've got to see what we inherit, though, haven't we? To be honest, we've got to see where we are in 2020.
No, I'm not going to give you. We know where you're going to be. Look, what they're going to do is they're going to run it as tight as they can for as long as they can. They'll put a bung in before the election, and they'll say, "We've had to put more money in the NHS because we love it. We gave the NHS the money it wanted for its own plan, and they made a balls up of it. We've sacked Simon Stevens, and we'll have to put somebody in who can do much better. But we love it. We've funded it more." That's what they're going to do. You know that.
Well, what about the SDPs? I mean, what is that landscape going to be like?
Horrendous. Nothing's going to happen. You know what's going to happen with SDPs. You're going to get your local people out on the ground with their placards and banners. We're going to have more judicial reviews than you can throw a black cat at, and the whole thing is just going to grind to a bloody halt of consultation. We're seeing it now. Look what's happened in Lincoln. Grantham, yeah. A Conservative local authority has triggered the Conservative Secretary of State for Health to put a Conservative peer in to do a review because they don't like the fact that the A&E isn't open at night and they've closed one. Well, the answer to that is give us the money, we'll open it.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do?
Well,
Stop asking me what I'm going to do. I'm losing the grip here, actually. Losing my grip.
Well, I mean, I would say we have to stabilise things and we have to find the money. But I'm not going to say tonight, don't worry.
No. Listen, let me set the context here. I mean, this is not about getting him to say things that we're going to nail him to. I mean, this is like kind of a discussion. So, I mean, we would all agree, wouldn't we, that we're going to have to quote find the money. Yeah. What do you think of this sort of generally held view that the NHS can probably struggle on, although there'll be no capital expenditure, but social care is in desperate need of more money.
Absolutely.
But if we merge health and social care, we've got a problem because social care is means tested and health isn't. Which bit of the fulcrum point does it land on? Does health become means tested or social care become entirely free? I mean, that's a conundrum. What are you going to do about that?
No, absolutely. It's a complete conundrum. And you're right, we do have to solve the social care crisis. You know, £4.6 billion worth of cuts over 6 years has got us to where we are today. The kind of buzzwords in politics now is integration. And everybody signs up to integration and says, oh, it's going to sort everything out.
I'm not so sure. Two turkeys don't make an eagle.
Well, quite, because you are bringing together two organisational structures with different cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is part of some of the frustration that perhaps the local politicians have with the SDP process. When I say local politicians, I mean more the local authority leaders. I mean, local authority leaders and figures do have an idea of what is needed in a locality, but in that SDP room, you know, the guys who are more powerful are the guys with the big money, the trusts and so on, rather than local authorities, because also local authorities will say to you, well, you know, we can't do that because we've got to balance our budgets year on year. You know, and I know the government is pressing trusts to deal with their deficits, but it's not quite the same. Once the local authorities run out of money, it's run out of money.
Well, by law, trusts have to balance their books, and it was Frank Dobson who said, I'm going to interpret balancing books as having a rolling program to balance the books, and then suddenly everybody started pushing this great bow wave of debt in front of them. Thank you, Frank. It's got us off the hook.
Yeah, well, exactly. So anyway, I was slightly going off on a tangent, but I was trying to make the point that you've got these two cultures sort of clashing at a local level, and we're expecting them to integrate. It probably does mean pooling budgets, but you're right. That means probably nationally set eligibility criteria for social care. It does mean some serious questions.
No, hang on. I like that. Nationally agreed criteria for eligibility, because at the moment 23% of people who used to get local authority care, they reckon it could be 900,000, no longer get it because the eligibility criteria has been set locally, and people have just become refugees in the system.
No, exactly.
We don't know what the hell's happened to them.
So you should have, I believe, you should have this nationally set criteria, eligibility criteria, and so it is essentially, you know, portable. It goes with you. You move from Surrey Heath and you come to the civilised city.
Portable eligibility criteria. I do like that. Maybe you're not all a bad guy. Maybe you can think more than I thought.
I don't know if it's the best phrase for it, really, though. It's a very techie, jargony phrase.
What? Portable eligibility criteria? What is it? Portable eligibility... a PEC. Well, you could all carry a PEC. Yeah. Well, what's wrong with that? It's a good idea.
Oh, well, there we go.
Jonathan Ashworth, that is give him a round of applause. That's a really good idea. Who thinks it's a bad idea? There you go. You got a winner.
Oh, there we go. Then it's.
You might hang on to your seat with that.
I hope so.
What does your wife do?
She works for the Labour Party as well.
Oh shit! Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. So none of you got a proper job. Right. No, that's a good idea. You got any more good ideas?
Well, we've got loads of good ideas. We want to engage in the discussion. I like your idea, by the way, which I've stolen a little bit and passed it off as mine. About that's what us politicians do. About, you know, there is such kind of lack of credibility or lack of transparency now in the big money figures for the NHS. I mean, it becomes a bit of a ding dong. I get up in the House of Commons and say the NHS hasn't given it enough money. You know, it's all terrible. Jeremy Hunt gets up and says we've given it enough money. We're giving it more than you would give.
And it's had more money than it's ever had.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what really hacks me off when they say that.
And it goes back and forth, and we have very well argued policy papers from the King's Fund and so on, making different arguments. But essentially, there's this sort of political ding-dong. Well, I genuinely think we should have some independent body, which you alluded to, which gives an assessment of demographic changes in society, tries to give an assessment of needs in society to advise governments on what the NHS should need. So I personally would prefer it. I'm not the Shadow Chancellor, but I would prefer it if an incoming Labour government was able to set out a clear 5-year budget for the NHS. But I would also prefer it if there was an independent body who said, all right then, we've assessed the ageing population, we've assessed the growing complex needs, we've assessed innovations in technology and what's happening in innovations in technology, and we think over this 5-year period the NHS needs this amount of money.
Independent assessment of need report.
Yeah. It's now up to you, Mr. Chancellor or Mrs. Chancellor, to find the money for it. And I think that would give certainty to everybody involved in the health policy debate.
Yeah. Anybody else got any ideas? We're scratching here. Come on, for God's sake. Right, question time. What do you want to ask? Over to you. Jade. This is one of the most famous whistleblowers in the NHS. Right, okay. Now, oh God, she's written a question down. If you read that lot out...
I'll be very brief.
This is my leggy blonde assistant who, on the microphone.
Okay, my question is,
No, the microphone is for recording. It's not... Yeah, Jade, you're going to have to give it some welly, love.
I'll speak
Give it some welly.
There's perhaps much scepticism
at the moment as to whether the present health minister's ambitions to make the NHS the safest healthcare organisation in the world are really tackling some of the core issues. And I accept we're all here this evening, we all perhaps, I'm sure, feel a certain love for the NHS, free at the point of need. And with this in mind, would the shadow health minister support what I believe is right to save the reputation of our great national institution and support a public inquiry into both historic and present cases of NHS cover-up relating to deaths and harm to children and adults, including the sometimes deplorable treatment of bereaved families and whistleblowers who are trying to get to the truth and stop harm occurring to others?
I don't see why not. I mean, you've obviously put the question to me now, but I mean, it doesn't seem an unreasonable request, so I don't see why we wouldn't.
It's very wide-ranging, and public inquiries cost a fortune and take years.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, I mean, I agree. I mean, we've treated some whistleblowers, and indeed yourself, I think, miserably badly. And God knows how hospitals ever get into such a mess with whistleblowers. I do not know why they don't crawl on their hands and knees from one end of the hospital to the other, begging people to tell them what's going on. I mean, I think it's balmy. But I mean, public inquiries, I think it's easy to say, yeah, we'll have a public inquiry, but then you've got to get someone to chair it. Then it's going to go on forever. And look at what happened with Francis, really. We had a 365-page report that has been largely shelved.
Yeah, and I think, I think it's a very fair point you've made, which is why, I mean, I'm not being dismissive. I want to think about it. I think obviously, people who have gone through what you went through, and you went through the most intolerable situation, and I really do pay tribute to you for what you did, need to feel like they've been listened to and they've got justice. So the proposal you have may be the right way of doing it. There may be more practical ways of doing it. We need to think about it, but we have to do something.
I think the whole whistleblowing thing needs to be looked at. I mean, I would take the people out of the whistleblowing environment, get them employed in a trust nearby, or what have you, and then sort that out so you keep working, we don't lose your skills. There's a lady buried at the back, in the back row, next to the lady from Leicester. Next to the lady from Leicester, hang on, my leggy blonde assistant will leg it. Would you give it a bit of welly for us?
Right. Maria Nicholson, but Maria Truern is my new name. I'm an elected member of the RCN Council. I would like to ask about what your support is for the march on the which is about the NHS on Saturday, both of you.
Oh, right, yeah, I'll be there.
Which is on Saturday. Yeah. But also, bearing in mind that we've got the greatest shortfall of nursing availability in the country at this moment that we've ever experienced, even going back some years from when I came back into nursing. Same for GPs who are, can't get out of the business quick enough at the moment. The future of primary care as well as acute care is really it's balanced on the cliff edge.
Okay, let me I'm going to cut you off there, not to be rude, but so that you don't ask us a question so long we forget what it was. And there's time for some other people. Yeah. As far as the march is concerned, I will be there with a blonde on Saturday. We're filming and interviewing, and we'll be live on Periscope. So you'll be able to watch us in the midst.
We are supporting the march. I think Jeremy
See you there.
Corbyn is now speaking at it. I think he is. Well, I know he is. I don't know if he's announced it yet. I hope I haven't just blown one of his press stories. So
sorry, Periscope.
The Labour Party is supporting it, and I think it does demonstrate the scale of anger and concern there is about the future of the NHS.
What good will it do?
Well, I mean, there's always arguments about whether marches and rallies achieve anything or not. But
Doctor strike, what good did it do?
I still think it's important that people who care about the future of the NHS are given an opportunity to come together and make their voice heard. And it's important that the leader of the Labour Party is there speaking to them and reassuring them that we are taking this fight to the Tories.
Who does Jeremy Corbyn's shopping? Because on Saturdays he's always at a march. When does he get time to go to Lidl's? That's what he's always at mine. I mean, look, we'll be there because we want to cover it. We covered the junior doctors' strike, as you probably know. I think, you know, we would feel. The only complaint I had about the junior doctors' strike was that I said, the next time you go on strike, can you do it in June? Because it was so bloody cold. But and you know, we got a march on the weekend. It's going to be so bloody cold again, you know. No, but we will be there. But I mean, what does it do? Does it really help you in Parliament that people are on the streets? I mean, look what Mrs. Thatcher did with I suppose, you know, with the community charge and all that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you know, when you're campaigning to win public opinion or to change public opinion, and there's different ways of doing it. Marches and rallies are one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is campaigning in your local area, literally going door to door, you know, talking to people directly. I'm a great believer in that. I do it a lot in my own Leicester constituency, even though it's a safe seat. I'm always out talking to people on the doorstep. There's different ways of doing it, of course, and the other way of doing it is by being seen in the national media making the arguments.
Yeah. Can we just deal with the nurses? I'll come to you in a minute, so my leggy blonde assistant will find his way to you. Nurses, 27,000 nursing vacancies. The RCN are invisible. You never see them on the telly. After Peter Carter left, it's like the RCN have closed and shut up shop. What the hell's happened to the RCN?
Well, I'll leave the RCN rep at the back to argue with you on that. But on nurses, you're absolutely right. And one of the couple of things that we have said in recent weeks is that we don't agree with this pay cap. We don't think it's fair. We think Jeremy has said there are other ways of funding it, and we have opposed it in Parliament. Also today, we've had a debate in Westminster Hall. While I was having a go at Jeremy Hunt in the Commons in another bit of Westminster, there's an important debate going on about assaults on nurses and other NHS staff in hospitals and so on. And
should we make that a separate offence?
We have said now in the Labour Party that we will legislate to make that a separate offence. I think that's the case. I think in Scotland at the moment. So
yeah. There's a huge number of them. Over 18,000 assaults.
Exactly, and it's going up. It's gone up as well. So, and I know the RCN are very much behind that campaign as well.
Yeah. And what about the bursary? Would you reintroduce
we will
the
definitely reinstate it. Beg your pardon. Yeah, we will definitely. We've said we will reinstate that. I mean, it's no surprise, is it, when the UCAS figures came out a couple of weeks ago, the huge drop in applications. Yeah,
but you're still getting more applications than there are places. It won't affect the number of nurses coming through. Well, and at Leicester, is it Leicester we went to? Is it his gaff? Where did we go?
No, it's not Leicester. The first,
Friday. Yeah, the non-commissioned nursing course. Where was that? Lancashire. First non-commissioned nursing course at Lancashire Hospital. They got fed up with it all, so they said we'll train our own nurses. It was a non-bursary course, so people knew they'd have to get a student loan, and they did it. They had 65 places and over 2,000 applicants. It doesn't, I mean, it will make a difference to some people, I get that, but it hasn't made a difference to the numbers. And until it makes a difference to the numbers, I don't think the government will change it, and I tell you what, I don't think the Labour Party will either, because you won't throw money at what is not a problem. In terms of, do we want more nurses? Yes. Are we training as many as we can train now? Yes. Will the absence of a bursary make any difference? Well, look, you know, in the first year, a student nurse won't pay anything back. And in the second year, I think after their first increment, it's £7 a month. And I think a lot of nurses will say, do you know what, I'll do that. Now, there's an issue with the older nurses, which you can fix through grants. No, you don't agree? Yeah, I thought you might. That's why I said it. Yeah.
And had to pay a full grant.
Yeah.
At 3,000, and she's still paying that.
Who's this?
Off. This is my daughter. She's not a nurse, but as
3,000.
She paid the 3,000 a year, and the issue
£60 a week.
She's still paying
How
off
much she
that.
earning?
And how many years is it after the event? So will we actually ever get the money back?
Well, I don't think.
The
No,
issue
I
is
mean, I
that.
don't think. Yeah.
And a newly qualified nurse.
I don't want to
will
get
not
stuck on this
earn
because there's a guy here. I'm not being
that.
rude, but I do need to
No,
move
but
on.
it-
But I mean,
The nursing issue is Brexit, and the issue already with 98%
yeah.
reduction.
Well, there. Let's do, while my leggy blonde assistant makes his way invisibly to the next questioner.
I mean,
Let's deal with Brexit.
I mean, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's the big thing we've not even touched upon tonight, and that is the biggest issue. And it was remiss of me not to mention it, because when I made my point, I think, about Theresa May, sort of, I think, not really being that interested in the NHS. I mean, even if she was interested in the NHS, Brexit is dominating everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked in government, in number 10 and Treasury, under a Labour government. When an issue of this magnitude comes along, it sucks the energy up of everybody else, everyone in government. You know, so the idea that this government is going to be able to put in place a solution to the social care crisis, it just won't have the intellectual energy to put in place a solution to the social care crisis, because Brexit is dominating everything, and the implications for the NHS have not even been really explored. I mean, we have the sort of ding-dong debate about when are we going to have our 350 million a week. I mean, that goes on. But we've never really sort of got to the bottom of what it means for the NHS, when there are big questions, as you say, about recruitment of doctors and nurses.
Applications to become nurses from the EU last quarter were down by 98%.
Exactly. Big implications also for the Medicines Agency.
Yeah.
Also big implications for the NHS finances, because if you look at these STPs, by the way, all their forward estimates about how much money they think they'll save, or how much money it's going to cost them if they're on their do-nothing scenarios, they are all built on an assumption that exchange rates and interest rates are going to remain where they are now. Well, I don't think an assumption like that can be built into the system, and we simply don't know what the economic implications are of Brexit for things like the interest rate and the exchange rate. So huge implications for the NHS.
Announcement today, wasn't there, about compensation?
Yeah.
Because they're taking out when you get compensation, if you get 100 quid with the compensation, you don't get the 100 quid. They give it 100 quid less what you could have if you put it on deposit.
Yeah.
So it's like they give you 90 quid and assume that you'll make the other 10 quid up when it's on deposit. Now, because that's changed, Liz Truss today has made some changes which actually mean that because interest rates are down, instead of the 100 quid being discounted to 90, it's going to be 95 because interest rates are down, which means the NHS, if it gets caught in all of this crap, will end up having to fork out more. They reckon it's about £1 billion.
£1 billion, which the government has said they're going to underwrite. So,
yeah.
So they're underwriting this £1 billion hit for the NHS, which, I mean, you've got no option about that. But of course, lots of people are quite, not unreasonably asking them questions about. Where's
the £1 billion going to come from? Okay, let's let my leggy blonde assistant earn his bonus.
Hello. I'm Malcolm Green. I'm a retired doctor, and I want to ask about the money, because I'm sure everyone in this room is agreed the NHS needs more money. But there are two problems with giving it more money. The first is the NHS will consume that money. It will use it. And then we'll run out of money again. So if we give the NHS more money, and the Labour Party did a good job of giving the NHS more money in whenever it was, right?
Yeah.
But it was business as before. And there were no major changes.
I think you came in late. We said that. What's your second part?
What are you going to do about it?
Oh, that's a fair question. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, well,
Could you hurry up, because we've got the room booked till 11 o'clock.
But here, all right, let me put it a slightly different way. I mean, we've got a group of experts here, and people who work in the NHS in different capacities and so on. If the Labour Party came into the government in 2020 and found the money, either by doing something very radical, like Gordon Brown did, or perhaps just making decisions in the public finances and switching things from elsewhere, it's supposed to be up to a Chancellor of the Exchequer to make those decisions. I'm not giving any preference, but suppose it found the money, what should we be spending it on? Because it'd be easy for me to sit here and, having been the Shadow Health Secretary for 3 or 4 months, and say, well, we'll do it on X, Y, Z, and this, but I don't think you'd believe me anyway, and you'd probably be thinking, well, what does he know? He's only been the Shadow Health Secretary for 3 or 4 months. What do people in the service think it needs to be spent on, and how do we spend the money in such a way that it doesn't, as you quite rightly warn, just go into a sort of black hole, and then 5 years, 6 years down the line, we come back again with all the NHS professionals and all the think tanks like the King's Fund saying, crumbs, we need more money again.
Well, we wasted it again. I mean, I think that, I'll come to you in a moment, man. And there's a lady from Leicester's coming in again, and it's Delia. Della, is it? You see, I can read that, Della, because I don't wear glasses anymore. I don't have, things. I know. Look, I mean, the money thing. I think it's a good question, and we haven't given it a tough enough kick in that question, and I think we should, because look, you're right. It is demand-led. The NHS is demand-led. So How do you deal with a demand-led business? Okay, well, in business, we would say we'll stop the demand, or we'll divert the demand. Now, you can divert the demand by saying to people of a certain type with a certain condition, the NHS doesn't do that, bugger off and sort yourself out. So you pay for your taxes out of your right-hand pocket, your top-ups out of your left-hand pocket, but it's still your trousers, you still got to pay, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. Or we say, how do we divert demand? Well, we just stop people getting whatever it is you've got in the first place, which is a longitudinal thing, it's a public health issue, and it's well beyond a 5-year parliament, and I don't know any politician who's really keen on public health, apart from Tony Blair, who, you know, whatever you think of Tony Blair, he did this country a huge favour by banning smoking in the workplace. It had almost an immediate effect. So, you know, what is there to stop people getting a sore hip? What is there to stop people wearing their knees out? You know, do you stop people praying so they don't have to bend down anymore? You know, or what do you do about obesity? Sorry, Chaplain. Or what do you do about obesity? You know, do you have a law that says no chip shop can have a door wider than 18 inches? You know, so you can't get in. I mean, what do you do about public health?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is a really good set of questions, or issues about public health that you're raising, which we sort of got into it a little bit when I was talking about alcohol. You know, I think we all accept, I think, that the assumptions about demand management in the 5-year forward view have not been met whatsoever, and we need to have a serious think in this country
2% they want.
About what are we going to do to reduce demand on the health service, and public health initiatives has to be part of it. But of course, public health budgets now allocated to local authorities. Local authorities under immense pressure across the country are cutting them back. It looks like now they're going to be told to fund their public health budgets through business rates. Well, that's fine in Surrey Heath. Your business rates probably raise quite a lot of money across Surrey. Raise a lot of money, more money head for head than a city like Leicester, which will have all kinds of deprivation.
But they're saying now, Sajid Javid said, oh, there'll be a reallocations model, so we will equalise it. So now they're going to take it from the rich boroughs and give it to the poor boroughs. This is like a Robin Hood idea. And can you imagine the complications of the formula and the number of people that are going to be employed to do that? I mean, I was a leader of a council when Mrs. Thatcher did nationalise the business rate last time. And, you know, we quite liked the business rate because we did actually soak the businesses to sort out, you know, libraries and holes in the road and day centres. Even in Surrey Heath, we did that. But you know, this time they're going to have a reallocations model. I mean, please.
Well, you can't just... I think if we want to be serious about public health, we've got to be serious about the funding of public health. You know, we know diabetes, type 2 diabetes costs the economy billions, is on the rise. We know, as you know, jokes about it, but it is a serious problem, obesity in society.
Yeah, it is, yeah. But what can we do about it?
Well, I mean, one of the things which I think we've got to seriously think about is a radical intervention in the same way as we took on smoking, about sugar and things like that. If you watch, as I'm sure you do, right, you know, X Factor on a Saturday night,
absolutely,
or whatever, all the kids are watching it. How much sugary, dreadful food and drink is advertised to children? You know, ice cream, you know, soft drinks. You know, mum goes to Iceland to get these cakes. All that stuff targeted at children. You know, when they're watching family entertainment shows. I know we've done stuff on supposedly children's advertising, but you've got to remember, children are watching, you know, these shows.
Do you think
as
advertising will make any difference?
I think well, you know, again,
why do parents just say no?
Well, but on all these
what
things,
happened to being a parent?
But there's very few things in life which are a single silver bullet, and you've got to use everything at your disposal. And unless we do something to take on the industry, you know, we're still going to have an obesity problem. Just think about. I tried to calculate it, but you know, it's being too immense a job. But think about the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of calories that are advertised every sort of Saturday evening to children on family viewing. I mean, we've got to do something about it.
Delia.
Hi, my name's Della Reynolds, actually.
Delia?
But I'll call myself Delia.
I will decide what your name is.
My name is Delia Reynolds, and I represent a pressure group looking to reform the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, who deal with all the health service complaints. There have been a lot of reports recently, some from the Patients Association, making it quite clear that body's not fit for purpose. And I wondered if you had any views on the draft legislation that's waiting in the wings to go through the House for the new public service ombudsman. We're very concerned in our pressure group that this is just going to get washed away with the Brexit issues.
Yeah, I think it's. I think it probably will get washed away with Brexit. I think it was supposed to be debated and so on in the House of Lords before it became to the House of Commons. So I've not seen it because it's one of those things. Sometimes it's unusual, but sometimes bills do start in the House of Lords, and I think from memory this was one of them. I've not looked at it in great detail, but I'll be happy to have a proper conversation with you about it. Well, brilliant! You've got a paper for me. That's fantastic. I would be interested more broadly about your views about the Ombudsman. I know from just being a constituency MP, I get loads of constituents coming to me with complaints about, you know, what's happened to them with their own treatment. And when those complaints come in, I quite, as you'd expect quite rightly, raise them with the, you know, Leicestershire Partnership Trust. A lot of them tend to be about Leicestershire Partnership Trust, I'm afraid, or whoever. And you know, when we don't always get a satisfactory response, that constituent will want to take things to the Ombudsman, and
But they can't. I mean, we've had the Ombudsman woman. Were you here that night? I mean, I have to say that was a bit of a lackluster performance. Perhaps she was just having a bad night, but I just came away and I thought, what? And complaining about the NHS is so difficult, and the trusts handle it so badly. There are some boards that don't even analyse complaints, and it is appalling, really, how complaints are. I mean, you've got to figure out who's got an axe to grind and who's got a point to make. So that, you know, it's not that easy. But it's some of the way people get treated with their complaints is just ridiculous.
I mean, one of the things I would say, and I'm cautious saying this because I may well be entering into you know, into sort of uncertain ground. But looking at this, coming as someone who hasn't worked all his life in health policy development, I suppose this comes back to the point you were making, Jay, is when you look at how the health service or health provision is regulated in this country, it does seem overly complicated. And I think the Francis report did recommend sort of one sort of regulator from sort of the care and money. As I say, I'm coming at this as a new sort of health secretary. I want to understand it properly and talk to people. But just sort of approaching this afresh, it does strike me that it's overly complicated.
But that's a good thing, to come to it with a fresh pair of eyes. And the complaints thing is it's a complete. I just don't know why trusts aren't more diligent with complaints, because you can learn to improve services. And if you look at the CQC, I mean, look how that's just hammering around the country. You know, saying this trust doesn't employ enough nurses, therefore it's badly led, therefore it's going to be marked down as, you know, needing. You know, okay, fine. Let's ring up Amazon and get a box of nurses. You know, that would be a great idea, wouldn't it? You know, 250 million a year for the CQC? I don't think so. And, you know, have you got
I've just got a comment which
on Twitter, yeah.
Coming through quite a lot on Twitter, and people are saying, if anybody could persuade me to stay in the Labour Party, it's this man, Hidden Depths.
Hey, right.
All right.
Not me. Right, was there someone here who had a question? Yeah, the chaplain is going to have a... Yeah, hang on, chaplain, just a minute. I'm afraid my leggy blonde assistant's gender realignment tablets aren't working.
Part of my role is staff support, and I'm increasingly appalled at the amount of ill health of our frontline staff, particularly in A&E and discharge liaison social workers. Stress, depression, and I wonder what you would say in response to what an ACP said to me the other week as he walked out the door, that he feels that he is cannon fodder. The hospital, the biggest hospital we work in, is frequently gridlocked. There aren't places in the community to discharge the staff to. A&E constantly has people coming through the door, and we've been up to 63 patients in the corridors. What would you say in response to that?
We have corridor nurses now. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tunstall have been selling to the NHS radio-controlled buzzers that people can use in the corridors because they don't have any pull cords. So, you know, as far as Tunstall concerned, or whoever it is, it's an ill wind, I suppose. But anyway, I mean, the front line, he said, you know, fund the front line, you know, fund it properly, make it fun to work there. You know, it's simple, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we all know, and us politicians get up all the time and say, you know, we thank all the NHS staff, we thank them for their goodwill, and every politician says that, but it feels to me like we're increasingly exploiting the goodwill.
Yeah, thank God you're still there, and you're not sensible enough to go and get a job with Marks and Spencers.
And you know, the NHS is probably one of the biggest employers in the United Kingdom, if not the biggest employer. It should be one of the best, if not the best employer in the United Kingdom. So I'm very interested in putting in place proper support and measures to help.
What does that mean? I mean, does it mean like a big hospital that doesn't have a creche and employs 70% women?
Well, I was going to say this because I think on one of your blogs that I read once, you were talking about, you know, giving nurses proper childcare support and things like that, and I was very struck by that. Why shouldn't our nurses get the best childcare support? If that would encourage people to stay in the service, then that would make sense to me. That's something we should explore. I don't know how much it will cost, and you know, I'll probably get an email from the, you know, some advisor to the Shadow Chancellor telling me off and making a spending commitment now. But you know, these are the sorts of things.
I think they're easy to look at. Yeah, I mean, I go back to the time when I ran a hospital and I set up a creche. It was just sensible because I wanted people to come to work.
Yeah.
You know, and it was anyway. Now listen, I know you've got a question, lady from Leicester, but you've already had one, so I'm very sorry. If you will forgive me, you stay behind and ask Jonathan in a minute. But the final word has to go to our sponsor. Now, this is the last question of the evening, Shane, so it'll better be a cracker.
Can I give some suggestions as well?
Yes.
As well as, you know, I think we missed a boat in the last couple of years on putting 2p on fuel that might have helped. And I would say, I know you're talking about 2, 3, 4 years till an election. I'd like you to think that you could influence your opposition a lot stronger, a lot faster. I think addressing the issue about money, if I'm right, the forecasted deficit this year is about 890 million. With about 100 billion budget within 1%, in business we'd say that's probably not too far, and actually any reasonable government should be able to provide for that deficit based on the last 5 or 6 years of efficiency gains and attempts at that. To address the issue, it's not all about efficiency gains or about investment, and I would suggest that actually the government looks at matching investment with efficiency gains and educating the populace. We're doing that. We're trying to educate people a lot to take responsibility for their diabetes and fizzy drinks and all that. That's good. We've made a big start on that last 10 years. A lot more to do. The answer isn't a bailout, but the answer is also for people who are working really hard to get some of the money that they need, not just none. If you just stifle an organisation, it will just continue to wither away. And I think it's definitely been shown in the last 20 years, at least twice, that different parties, such as the Tories and Labour, have been able to invest in our wonderful health service, and I think it can be done again. And I'd like to think you've got a good opportunity to convince May that she's got to do something different. If you've got a good relationship with Jeremy Hunt and you can get his people to listen, have a listen to some of that. Invest and help them take away some of those frontline pressures. 9.5 billion is what the King's Fund said, I think, in the report last week.
Yeah.
So 1 billion of that will shore up this year. And the other thing, my final point is this. If you're really courageous, I think you've got to talk about a 10-year term. You've got to transcend 2 parliaments. That might be past your office, it might be past your government. But you have to look at a 10-year plan to really turn this around.
I mean, it's a great question. Of course, Norman Lamb is looking at a cross-party approach, which might carry it beyond the span of a 5-year parliament. What do you think about it?
Well, I think you're right about the 10-year approach. I mean, you asked me questions about what we were doing in 2020, and I said, well, I don't know what the landscape will look like. But I think part of the thinking I want to do, and part of the reason I want to engage with people like at events like this, but also going around the country, is that we need to have a debate in this country about what we want the health service to look like, not just in 2020, but in 2030 and 2035. Given that we've got an ageing population, given that if the implications of Brexit are a reduction in people from across Europe coming to work here and therefore paying less tax, and we're all getting older, but also, there is a debate now going on about the future of the economy and what jobs look like when you've got digitisation of jobs, automation of jobs. We haven't really explored what that means for the health service yet. But if a load of sort of, if you like, white-collar middle-class jobs are going across the world economy because of, you know, automation, robots are now drawing up wills, for example, that is also going to have an impact on the health service. So this is a debate we want to engage in now about what we want the health service to look like, how it is funded, and what it will look like in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And on your point about can we persuade the government to do something now? Well, I hope so. I mean, the deficit you talked about is the hospital deficits, so it's a huge chunk. But even if the government suddenly found the 800 or 900 million, I think people across the service would still say there's a huge squeeze going on. I obviously want them to give more money, but we've got this budget now in about, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks. The priority, I think, has to be for that budget.
What have you heard? Any whispers?
Well, we all see what we sort of read in the HSJ and things like that. People seem to think there's going to be something for social care. But the local government association have said if they really want to resolve social care, in the short term, it's going to cost 2.6 billion. That's a big chunk of money.
And the longer you leave it, the more it's going to be.
The longer you leave it, the more it costs. But they've got to do something. I don't think they can carry on burying their heads in the sand on this. And if they come up with something, you know, we would work with them on it. But we were very stung politically about 5 or 6 years ago when Andy Burnham thought he was getting some cross-party agreement on social care, and then, and I think to be fair, he was getting agreement with Andrew Lansley. But then George Osborne, who was running the Conservative Party election campaign, then put up a load of posters saying Labour were going to introduce a death tax because they were looking at whether you essentially fund social care from your sort of inheritance tax, basically. So there's a bit of nervousness about cross-party working. But if the government want to work with us, of course I'd work with them to find a social care solution.
We will be running an event. We're announcing it a bit later on, which will be hopefully a cross-party event. So you might want to come to that. Terry, have you got a couple of? I'm out of time, so.
Yeah, so obviously people, this is what you've been saying is really resonating because you've been trending number 7 in the UK for the last hour. Lilley.
My God.
Yeah,
I don't even know what that means.
It's good. It's good. It's being associated with me, which is career threatening. I think you're going to be shuffled next week. Have we had a good evening? Wasn't that interesting? What a fabulous guest. Before we say thank you, now we have a little tradition that we always do at the end of these. Now, given your background and all the rest of it, this might be entirely inappropriate, but just accept it because it's what we always do. Okay. You're a big boy and you'll have to, you know. It's just that we like to give our guests a little gift. Yeah. And it's what fuels most of my inspiration, which is Penderyn whiskey. Okay, now hang on a minute. Now, Penderyn whiskey is Welsh whiskey, and I'm sorry to any Scots here, it's the finest whiskey that there is in the country. But more importantly, it's quite expensive and just above the threshold at which you have to declare it. And I love the idea that a lot of very important people in the NHS have had a bottle of whiskey from Roy Lilley and John Wilkes. You've been a great guest. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I can't wait, and I will be looking at the register of interest to make sure you do. Listen, thanks all for coming. Stay and have a drink with us, please. The next health chat is, somebody remind me?
29th of March.
Right, 29th of March. It'll be really interesting. It's Dr. James Kingston, who's the president of the National Association of Primary Care, who've come up with this really good idea called the Primary Care Home that you might want to have a look at. It's a way of getting primary care working together that works. It's clever. It's worth coming out, and you'll meet nice people, some of whom still wear spectacles. Amazing. Get them on, Shane. There we are. Terrific. Give yourselves a round of applause and our fabulous guest. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Periscope. Are we off air?